Well, let's begin. So we're calling our mission. And our mission is learning to be love in the world. It's actually better to say that we are unlearning a lot of things in order to get back to our original way of being. Um, so our poem fragment says, in troubled times, it takes great concentration to align ourselves with grace instead of force, with love instead of fear. We begin by allowing ourselves to be loved along with all the rest of creation. And then we fall into that love and let that love flow through us into the world. Last week, we talked about how ego is constructed upon fear and force, and that it results in obstruction in our being. That fear and force obstruct the flow of love. Love and grace, however, arise from our soul and flow freely when the ego doesn't block them. That's our natural state, our natural rhythm. So I want to tell you a story today from my own family about the obstruction of love that came about through fear, and then the flow of love that arose from an open heart. So this is a story about my dad and my stepmom, and my dad has passed away now. He passed away at 85 a couple of years ago. But the story I want to tell about him is how he, at the age of 82 years old, ended up arrested and in court for assault with a deadly weapon. Now, there's a backstory here, of course. First of all, my dad was a very fine citizen, and there were lots of people truly that was very touching that stood up at his funeral to talk about the ways that he'd served them, his extreme generosity, his kindness, his care. And he also considered him, he did that out of love, I know that he did, but he also considered himself a highly moral person. He considered him to be a person who knew right from wrong, and he knew who else was right and wrong. So he and my stepmom lived in a little town in Kansas that's pretty economically depressed. And they lived on the wrong side of the tracks. Literally, the tracks run through the town. They lived on the bad side of town. They had a cute little house that they'd put a lot of work into, and they were settled in there in their retirement. When the house next door to them became the house in the neighborhood where people were pulling up at all hours of the day and night to make a purchase. And everyone knew what was going on, and some people now and then would get arrested, but the police never seemed to be able to really shut it down. The man who lived there was a bad man. He was a scary man. There's no doubt about that. And he and my dad had many altercations. They went at it. And my dad would do things like put out a poster, a great big poster in the alley that warned anyone coming down the alley to his house that he was taking down their license plate numbers and notifying the police. So my dad made an enemy of this man. So one day my dad is out for a walk with his dogs and his cats. Yes, it's crazy, but all of the feral cats that my dad fed in the neighborhood would go on his walks with him. These are the good sides of my dad. So while he was on his walk, the neighbor accused him of being on his property. They exchange words, things escalate, and the next thing you know, my dad is pulling his concealed weapon. And he did have a permit, but he's pulling his concealed weapon, his handgun, and pointing it at the neighbor. The neighbor, the bad man who gets arrested all the time, calls the police on my dad, and they come and arrest my dad. So here's this little man with a gun getting hauled off by the police. When I talked to my dad about the whole thing, I said, well, I understand why you were afraid. And he immediately practically yelled through the phone, I ain't afraid of him. And to which I immediately wondered, well, why are you carrying a gun if you're not afraid of something? So the guy moves away. Eventually, he doesn't show up in court. They let my dad off, but he was out a bunch of money for the lawyer and the legal fees. And my dad was very, very sure he was in the right in his actions towards this man and towards the people who were frequenting the house in a legal and moral way, outside of pulling a gun on the guy. He was in the right. So my dad passes away. Some new people move in who are also drug dealers. Now, in this little house in Kansas, my 87-year-old tiny little stepmom still lives in that house by herself. So initially, we were all really worried about her, and concerned about the scary people that live in the neighborhood. So she took a very different tact than my dad took. She loved the people next door. She made friends with them. She asked them for their help when a bat got into her house and she was afraid and didn't know what to do. They started looking out for her. They told everyone coming around their place that she was their adopted grandma and to not mess with her. There's some other sketchy people in the neighborhood, but she treats all of them with love and kindness. And she said to me, Beck, I consider this my mission to love them and pray for them. So, where in these stories do you hear fear and control? And where in these stories do you hear love and flow? Where do you hear right, righteous? 2,000 years ago, Jesus said this, you have heard it said, love your neighbors and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. That word perfect always kind of gums up the works in me a little bit. But another passage in the Bible says this, perfect love casts out all fear. Remembering that the very base of the ego, the foundation of the ego is fear. The only antidote to that is love. So can you hear how the fear in my stepmom's neighborhood decreased when she became the one to love first. Can you not just hear it? Can you feel it? Just feel how the temperature came down, how the flow could be restored. What do you fear in 2025? Who do you fear in 2025? Just name some names silently to yourself. And then who do you fear by extension? There may be the one person, the two people, or multiple people that we fear, not knowing how they're going to behave, not knowing how they're going to act. Who do we fear by extension? Well, we fear them. We fear them, the ones we disagree with, the immoral ones, the ones who are wrong, the hateful ones, the stupid ones. Fear leads to seeing people as enemies, and when people become our enemies, the very next step is hate. I fear that for 2,000 years, people have really thought that Jesus was joking when he said to love our enemies. I haven't seen that many people actually doing this. We can disagree with others all we want, but we must always, always, always lead. Our first step needs to be love. My stepmom changed the world. She changed the world. At least her little world in her neighborhood. She didn't get rid of the drug house, but she opened up the flow of love. We can all be like her as we learn to be in the flow of love. We can also change the world. So let's practice together. I invite you to close your eyes and to take a deep breath and let it all the way out, settling into your seat. Take another deep breath. And as you let this one out, recognize that we are in love. We are in love, just like a drop of water is in the ocean. This is true in this moment. It was true in all of our previous moments. It will be true for all creatures in all moments. Love is. I invite you now to drop down into your own experience, to simply notice whatever it is that is happening in your being now. Any sensations, any emotions, any thoughts. Simply noticing and naming them silently to yourself. Our goal in a season of love is to come into flow with love. And we can only do this if we are in the moment. We can only do this if we are present. It only happens in the moment. So we practice at being present. And we begin always with our body. So as we become present in our body, we allow love to fill the body, beginning with the feet, the lower legs, the upper legs, our hips, letting love flow into and fill the pelvis, the belly, bathing all the organs of the belly. Letting love flow into the chest, the heart, our shoulders, our arms, and our hands. Letting love flow into our back, beginning at the tailbone, flowing through and up the spine, including the muscles, the rib cage, the scapula, and the neck. Letting love flow into and through the scalp, the head, coming to rest on the face. Now feeling your physical being, your body as a whole, filled with love here, now. And imprinting in your memory, in your mind, what this feels like so that you can return here. This is true. your being, your body filled with love. Feel the solidity, the here-ness of your physical being. And grounding yourself in that, begin to include any awareness of your inner being. We'll bring our awareness particularly to our heart. Letting love flow into our heart. And let's see what happens if we don't limit our idea that our heart is the size of our beating heart inside of our chest. What if our heart can be bigger than our body? Our heart, our emotional center. Just letting love flow in and see what happens. And now letting love flow into the part of you that we call spirit. This is your aliveness, the energy or flow that is completely separated from the physical energy of the body. This is spiritual energy that is available to you and in your being. Letting love flow into that part of you, affect that part of you. And seeing what happens. And now noticing your mind. Just like the heart, don't limit it to something the size of your brain. Let it be a larger mind. The part of you that can comprehend what is not considered comprehensible. Part of you that connects with what is beyond us. Letting love flow into the mind. If it doesn't become larger and more open, now experiencing yourself as body, heart, spirit, mind, one whole being filled with love, here, now. And now extending your beingness and your awareness out beyond your own four walls to come into connection with all that surrounds you. Using the eyes of the heart to see that the whole world is filled with love. Very ground of being. Let yourself be a part of that. And may we all serve that. To serve love rather than fear. To serve grace rather than force. Now feeling the way the earth is drawing you into itself. Holding you so that you do not have to hold yourself. You can relax. And become aware of your breath as it moves in and out. It's very, very natural flow of receiving and letting go. We can feel that this is our physical, natural state. It is also our spiritual, our mental, our emotional, natural state. To receive and surrender. So just stay in that flow for a few breaths. And at this point, really tapping in to the sensation of flow. The feeling that you are being carried by a flow. That you don't have to create it. You don't have to try to love. Simply open all the channels in yourself that naturally love. And join in the flow that is. And as we do this, all things that are not love can fall away. And we can simply rest in simple being. Thank you all so much for practicing with me and supporting my own practice. I love you all.